100 miles northwest of Las Vegas, past the last gas station anyone bothers to name, past the warning signs that carry no idle threat, there is a place that the United States government spent 4 decades pretending did not exist. No address. No entry on any public map. No acknowledgement in any official record. A patch of Nevada desert, ringed by brown mountains, sitting above a dry white lake bed that has swallowed more classified secrets than any other square mile of American soil. Pause. My name is Marcus Cole. For 22 years, I have covered classified programs, black budgets, and the long, quiet machinery of government secrecy. I have filed Freedom of Information requests that came back with every meaningful line erased. I have sat with men who chose their words the way a demolitions expert handles wire. Slowly, carefully, with a full understanding of the cost of a mistake. Exhale. But nothing in 2 decades of this work has gripped me the way this place does. Area 51. You already know the name. What you may not know is how much of what you think you know was designed, deliberately, skillfully, and without apology, to point you somewhere else. This is not a story about aliens. Or rather, it is not only a story about aliens, and the alien story is not the one that should disturb you most. The story that should keep you up at night is entirely human. It is the story of what a government discovers when it learns that secrecy works, that hiding things produces results, that a public, given no alternative, will eventually stop asking. Pause. That is the story of Area 51. The year is 1955. The Cold War is not an abstraction. It is a physical pressure on every decision made in Washington. The Soviet Union has nuclear weapons. Soviet fighter jets are outperforming American aircraft in Korea, and American military intelligence faces a problem that keeps Eisenhower's advisors awake through the night. They are blind. They cannot see inside Soviet territory. They cannot locate the missiles. They do not know the size of the bomber fleet. And what you cannot see, you cannot prepare for. Exhale. The CIA is authorized to build an aircraft that does not yet exist. One that can fly so high that no Soviet radar can reach it. A plane that can photograph enemy installations from the edge of the atmosphere and return home without a scratch. They call it the U-2. And it needs somewhere to be built and tested. Somewhere so remote, so stripped of everything, that no curious eye could ever find it. A CIA officer surveys the Nevada desert. He finds a dry lake bed, flat, white, already enclosed by military-restricted airspace, surrounded by mountains that would block any ground-level observer for miles in every direction. The lake bed is called Groom Lake. Within months, a small city rises from the salt flat. Hangars. Barracks. A runway carved into nothing. Workers arrive on unmarked aircraft from a terminal in Las Vegas that posts no schedules and makes no announcements. They sign agreements binding them not just for their careers, but for the remainder of their natural lives. The base is assigned a designation on Air Force grid maps. Area 51. The name means nothing. Pause. It will come to mean everything. The U-2 program succeeds beyond any expectation its architects dared to hold. Flying at 70,000 feet, 14 miles above the Earth, it photographs Soviet missile sites, submarine pens, and airfields with a precision that transforms American intelligence overnight. And the public knows nothing. Not the flights. Not the base. Not the workers. Not the secrets flowing back from deep inside Soviet airspace. All of it, buried under that vast and indifferent Nevada sky. After the U-2 comes the A-12 Oxcart, a plane so fast it can outrun a surface-to-air missile. Its body is built primarily from titanium, because aluminum cannot survive the heat generated at 3 times the speed of sound. There is a problem. The United States has almost no domestic titanium supply. The world's largest source is the Soviet Union. So the CIA establishes front companies and quietly purchases Soviet titanium through international markets, using Soviet metal to construct the very aircraft designed to spy on the Soviet state. It is one of the most audacious operational ironies of the Cold War. And it happened in complete silence, in a desert most Americans had never heard of. Exhale. After the A-12 comes the SR-71 Blackbird. To this day, the fastest air-breathing aircraft ever built by human hands, it could fly from New York to London in under 2 hours. In 1 hour of flight, it could photograph 32 cities in a single pass. When it was finally revealed in 1964, aerospace engineers around the world could not account for how it had been constructed. The gap between what the best civilian minds believed was possible and what had been quietly done in that Nevada desert was so enormous that some assumed outside help had been involved. Pause. It had not. What they had was unlimited secrecy, invisible budgets, and engineers permitted to attempt things no peacetime oversight body would ever have approved. That isolation does not only produce genius, it also produces impunity. Workers at Groom Lake through the 1980s and 1990s were routinely exposed to toxic chemicals used in the testing of classified aircraft. When they became ill, seriously, sometimes terminally ill, they could not tell their own doctors what they had been exposed to. Their medical histories were classified. When some of them died, the circumstances of their deaths were sealed. Their widows filed suit. A federal court dismissed the case on national security grounds. The government's right to protect its secrets was ruled by a court of law to outweigh the workers' right to understand why their husbands were dying. Pause. That ruling has never been overturned. By the 1980s, something new is being tested above Groom Lake. The F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth aircraft. Its shape looks almost absurd, angular, faceted, broken into flat geometric planes like a building someone forgot to round off. But that shape is the entire point. It does not reflect radar signals. It scatters them. It absorbs them. To any radar operator watching a screen, the F-117 is simply not there. Pause. Test pilots described flying it at night as unlike anything in conventional aviation. The aircraft moves through darkness without leaving a signature. It registers as nothing. And to any civilian on the ground below, any rancher driving home late, any camper outside Rachel, any worker on the night shift, looking up at that angular black shape moving silently in ways that make no sense against a sky that should be empty, the experience would be genuinely beyond any available framework. There was no context. There was no public knowledge of stealth aircraft. There were only lights behaving the way lights should not behave, shapes that matched nothing in the known world, and a government that, when asked, said absolutely nothing. Exhale, or worse, said weather balloon, said atmospheric reflection, said the words and provided no elaboration, no evidence, no follow-up, and then retreated behind a wall of institutional silence so absolute it seemed, to many observers, more like guilt than security. Here is what I want you to understand precisely about that silence. The government was not naive. They knew what people were seeing. They knew that the unexplained lights over Nevada were, in significant part, classified American aircraft. A simple, vague acknowledgement, "We are conducting classified aviation tests in this region. Please disregard unusual sightings," would have satisfied most observers while revealing nothing of operational value. Hust. They chose not to say it. They chose absolute denial. And in that choice, they handed the UFO mythology everything it needed to become permanent. The alien story at Area 51 was not born from ignorance. It was born from a government that could not stop lying long enough to tell a truth that would have cost it nothing. In July of 1947, something crashes on a ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico. The Army Air Force issues a press release. They call it a flying disc. Within 24 hours, they retract it and call it a weather balloon. Pause. The public notices the reversal. The public does not forget it. In 1994, 47 years later, the Air Force admits the truth. What had crashed was a high-altitude surveillance balloon from a classified program called Project Mogul, designed to monitor Soviet nuclear activity from the stratosphere. The cover story was real. The classified program was real. The 47 years of denial were real. And the explanation, when it finally came, was entirely plausible, technically accurate, fully documented, completely credible. Exhale. By 1994, it was also entirely too late. The alien narrative had been building for nearly 5 decades. It was structural. It was load-bearing. It was not coming down. I have thought about Roswell for a long time, not because I believe the extraterrestrial explanation. I do not. But because of what the story reveals about the true cost of systematic deception. When you lie to a population long enough, you do not merely lose their trust on the specific subject of the lie. You corrupt the instrument they would need to evaluate anything you tell them afterward. You have trained them, through repeated experience, that your corrections are no more reliable than your original claims. Pause. The government did not create the UFO mythology at Roswell, but they built every single condition necessary for it to survive. This is not an abstract concern. The same cycle plays out across every classified program that eventually surfaces. Lie, exposure, belated partial truth, permanent residue of distrust that outlives every administration, every apology, every declassified document. The lesson is not that government should keep no secrets. Some secrets genuinely protect real lives. The lesson is that secrecy without any mechanism of accountability does not hold, it degrades. And as it degrades, it takes with it the credibility of every true thing the institution might one day need the public to believe. Area 51 is still there. The restricted airspace above Groom Lake, designated R488N, remains one of the most aggressively enforced no-fly zones on American soil. Commercial satellite images, which the government once pressured private providers to withhold, now show a facility dramatically larger than the one that existed 20 years ago. New runways, new hangars, some large enough to house aircraft with no public designation, new structures whose purpose no official has ever addressed in any public forum. Pause. The workforce still arrives every week on unmarked aircraft from that same unmarked terminal in Las Vegas. The same system, the same silence. 70 years on, and the engine is still running. Defense researchers believe the current work at Groom Lake includes unmanned platforms of extraordinary capability, directed energy weapon systems still decades from public knowledge, and stealth aircraft designs that will not be officially acknowledged, until the mid-2040s. What is flying above that lake bed tonight is almost certainly a generation ahead of anything the public would recognize as cutting-edge aviation. Exhale. And somewhere in Nevada right now, a worker is signing the same paperwork that workers signed in 1955, trading their voice for a clearance, their story for a salary, their right to full medical transparency for the privilege of being part of something that will remain nameless for the rest of their working life. Pause. I do not say this with contempt for those workers. I say it with something closer to grief for the system that asks it of them and has never once built the mechanism to ask whether it should. In 2013, the CIA released 400 pages of declassified history covering the U-2 program. For the first time in the official American record, Groom Lake was named. The history of deception was acknowledged. It was treated as a moment of transparency. In the narrowest possible sense, it was. Pause. But read carefully, the document reveals its own precise boundary. Everything it confirmed was already publicly known. Everything still sensitive remained sealed. The 2013 release was not an opening. It was a controlled retreat to a more defensible position. A burn line cut to stop a larger fire. Exhale. I have stood at the fence at Groom Lake more times than I can easily count. I have been there at 3 in the morning when the desert is cold enough to ache and the sky overhead is so dense with stars it feels structural, like something you could put your hand against. I have watched unmarked vehicles sit motionless 200 meters away, watching me, watching them, neither of us moving. And I have stood there and tried to feel the shape of what I cannot see. Not the aircraft, not the programs. The larger thing, the decision made somewhere above all of it, that the people living in this democracy do not need to know what is being done in their name, with their money, by people they did not elect and cannot question. Area 51 is not, at its core, a story about whether we are alone in the universe. It is a story about whether a democracy can survive the habit of secrecy, about what happens when a government discovers that hiding things is effective and never builds the off switch, about the workers who made extraordinary things and could not tell their own children what they had built, about the widows who could not bury their husbands honestly, about the pilots who flew machines the world would not see for 30 years and carried that silence the way you carry something that has no bottom. Huss, the desert will keep the secret. It has kept it for 70 years and it will keep it for 70 more. But a desert is not a democracy. Montrezet. Pause. We are. And that difference, that one fragile, essential difference, is the reason this story is not finished. The reason I keep coming back to that fence. Whatever is flying above Groom Lake tonight, whatever name has not yet been spoken in any public room, it belongs, in some fundamental sense, to all of us. We paid for it. We defended it. We live inside the world that helped create.